Garrett Wilson, Ohio State, or Drake London, USC? Who is the better wide receiver prospect? That's the topic of this video. We're going to compare four different aspects of these prospects' games. We're going to compare their hands. We're going to look at their route running. We're going to compare their deep ball ability and yards after catch ability. We're going to use 13 different analytic metrics to make these comparisons, all provided by Pro Football Focus. Let's get it going. Let's start with their hands, starting with Garrett Wilson, wide receiver out of Ohio State. Wilson caught 73% of his targets last year. He dropped 7.9% of them. He had a contested catch rate of 62%. Let's compare that with Drake London, USC. London hauled in 68% of his targets with a drop rate of 8.3%, and he came down with 67% of contested balls. Really close here. Both hauling in over 2/3 of their targets, both dropping more passes than you would like out of what most scouts consider to be the top two wide receivers in this draft class, and both really good at the contested catch point. Drake London, obviously the 6'4 frame, the basketball background, the 50-50 ball is kind of what he's known for. But Garrett Wilson, he can play above the rim too. He's only 6 foot, but he has a cartoonish vertical leap. He's mossing people as well. So I'm looking here, it's pretty close. So I tried to find another nugget, another metric I can use to be a bit of a tiebreaker. And I thought to myself, okay, how far down the field are they running on these routes? Obviously a route that is run 20 yards down the field is going to be more of a reflection on a receiver's hands than a catch on a screen. So Garrett Wilson had an average depth of 11.6 yards per target last year, whereas Drake London had an average depth of 9.2 yards per target. So that, coupled with Garrett Wilson catching about 5% more of his targets and dropping slightly less balls, is going to put the hands category in Garrett Wilson's favor. He now has a 1-0 lead on wide receiver Drake London. Let's move into separation/route running. We're going to look at how they performed versus man coverage, right? When you think of a wide receiver who's a really good route runner or separates at the NFL level, I think of a wide receiver who shakes corners loose against man coverage. Let's start with Garrett Wilson, Ohio State. Wilson was targeted on 22% of the routes he ran against man coverage last year. So out of all the times that the opposing defense lined up man-to-man against Garrett Wilson, the ball was coming his way about 1/5 of the time. On those targets, he had a Pro Football Focus grade of 85.9. Specifically against press man coverage, he had a grade of 79. All really, really solid metrics. Let's compare it to Drake London. Drake London was targeted on 44% of the routes that he ran against man coverage last year, which is staggering. That was by far the highest in the country. Basically, whenever opposing defenses lined up man-to-man against Drake London, they were chucking it his way almost half the time. On those targets, Drake London had a grade of 87.4. Specifically against press man coverage, he had the highest grade in the nation of 88. So out of those three metrics, the man coverage score is heavily in Drake London's favor, but I wanted to find at least one more nugget, one more metric, just to be sure. So I thought to myself, okay, how are they doing in intermediate routes? Because when I think of a really good route runner, I think of a Stephon Diggs, a Cooper Kupp. I don't really think of a slant or a bubble screen or even a go route that just uses speed. I think of them shaking corners loose on comebacks, on curl routes, on out routes, on dig routes. So I dug a little deeper and I found out how they performed on intermediate routes, which Pro Football Focus considered to be routes that are ran 8 to 22 yards down the field. And on such routes, Garrett Wilson had a grade of 81 compared to Drake London, who had a grade of 86. So all four of these metrics against man coverage, Drake London scored slightly higher than Garrett Wilson. To me, with the eye test, I would have thought Garrett Wilson would score better here because of his quick feet and how elusive he is. But the numbers don't lie. Drake London gets the point for route running/separation. We now have a 1-1 tie. Before we move into deep ball ability, I just want to remind you, if you like videos like this and you'd like me to make a couple more, go ahead and hit that like button. And if there's other players you want me to compare by the numbers, go ahead and comment those down below. Moving into deep ball ability, starting with Garrett Wilson, Ohio State. Garrett Wilson had 9 deep catches in 11 games last year. A deep catch is defined to be a catch where the ball travels more than 20 yards down the field. Drake London had 15 deep catches in 8 games. Now, Garrett Wilson, as we said, he did run a little bit further, 11.6 yards of depth per target compared to 9.2 yards of depth per target for Drake London. But man, Drake London having almost double the amount of deep catches per game than Garrett Wilson definitely puts this in Drake London's favor. He has a 2-to-1 lead on wide receiver Garrett Wilson. And let's move into the fourth and final metric. That is their yards after catch ability. Both of these guys are really good yards after the catch guys. They both do it with different styles. Drake London, he's more of a bruiser. Garrett Wilson will just juke people out of his shoes and outrun them. But what do the numbers say? Garrett Wilson had an average of 6.0 yards after catch per reception last season. He also broke 19 tackles last year, compared to Drake London, 5.2 yak per catch, and had 22 guys try and bring him down and miss last year. So this is really close. Garrett Wilson, slightly better yak. Drake London, slightly better at breaking tackles. So I had to go ahead and find another tie-breaking metric to bring in here. So I thought, all right, well, how do they perform on screens? Because the screen game is a big component of how NFL wide receivers get their yards after catch. So Garrett Wilson had a stunning 10.6 average yards per screen catch last season. To get double digits every time you're getting the screen pass on average, a first down on average every time you get a screen pass thrown to you, is just absolutely ridiculous. Drake London, a very respectable 6.5 yards per screen catch. But that is going to be the tiebreaker, and that is going to put yak ability in Garrett Wilson's camp. It is a 2-2 tie. It ends in a 2-2 tie, so go ahead and break the tie in the comments down below. What am I missing here that would tip the scales towards Garrett Wilson or Drake London? This is not an open and shut case. This is a conversation. So let's act like gentlemen in the comments. We can disagree politely. If you like this video, go ahead, throw it a like, consider subscribing. But either way, let's go New York Jets.